Now this is the template that we will be using. So you're going to go through and you are going to cut out all of these sections. Make sure that you cut in on this outside line because the space between them here is your seam allowance. These are all the sections. They are labelled from A all the way to F. So obviously we're going to start with A. Now, when you are foundation paper piecing, you will see that each of the templates are numbered. So you always want to start with A1 and then A2 and then so on. So let's start now with A1 and I'm going to need a yellow piece of fabric. In my pattern instructions, I get you to cut out 2.5 inch squares. Now, some of these, as you can tell, you can have more than enough fabric, which is easy for me to get you to do 2.5 inch squares. You may be able to use the same piece of fabric more than once. So I'm going to get this A1, which is my yellow, and the A2, which is a brown. And then I am going to fold over my foundation paper piecing along that line. So I folded it in between A1 and A2. Now, the yellow piece of fabric will go to the back of the paper first because your foundation paper piecing is going to start taking place on the back of the piece of paper and we are going to sew on the front of the piece of paper. You want to place that A1 piece of fabric so it is facing up. And then the brown piece of fabric wants to be right sides down. So if you have a pattern on your brown piece of fabric, it's going to be right sides together. So both the designs are going to be facing each other. And then we're going to be making sure that we have at least 1/4 inch overhang. And then you're going to flip that piece of paper back, making sure we still have that 1/4 inch overhang, and we're going to sew that across this line in between the A1 and the A2. Just to let you know, I am not paid nor sponsored in any part of this video. The fabrics that I am using in this tutorial are the Baby Lock fabrics. They are called Sweet Seams and I will link them in the description box down below. As you can see, I used the Baby Lock Soprano. So let's go through the setup. In the top of the thread is I always use a Gutermann polyester in the top thread. In my bobbin, I always use a bobbin thread. I always use my regular sewing foot, the one that has the little black dial on there. A 9014 Microtech sewing needle. Now we want to take this stitch down to a 1.6. Just because we are sewing really small areas, you don't want it to be too big because it's going to come across as a basting stitch on this. So you want to take them stitches down. So we carry our 2 sections over very carefully and then you're going to drop that foot down and I'm going to put that pivot key on. Now that pivot key allows me to sew hands free and this foot will go up and down automatically. So I'll just show you. So, 1 second here. I need to nudge that needle up a little bit, like move it to the right. There we go. So I'm going to push this needle down and making sure that that falls down in the center. And then I'm going to sew, lift my foot up. See what happens? This goes up and down on its own without me having to go to the back of my machine. So here we go. I should have back stitched over that first stitch, but I didn't. There we go. Remember that needle wasn't quite falling into the center of where I needed it to be. So a center stitch is always 3.5. And how I moved that was you either move it this way or this way, and it moves that needle left and right. So watch that needle. This is the stitch that we just did. Now, every time that we do this, we're going to have to take off the 2 stitches on the front and also turn it over. I'm going to have to take these ones off the back. Just these loose threads here. Just keep everything nice and tidy as we go. And then we are going to pull back this brown section. So this is how we do foundation paper piece in. So we're going to turn this back around, and that was A2 that we just did. So now we want to fold back between this A2 and this A3, like so. I'm going to get my cutting board and my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut off 1/4 inch here. Now I'm going to land this ruler 1/4 inch, and I am going to cut, and that is 1/4 inch from my piece of paper. Now I want to get a piece of yellow, and I'm going to put it, oops, sorry, I'm going to put it next to this other piece of fabric. I keep banging that camera. And I'm going to turn this over, and I am going to stitch again now in between A2 and A3. Now once again, you're going to go ahead and trim these tails. Fold that fabric back. And all you need to do is finger press, or I also have this roller that you can use. You don't really need to be up and down pressing this just yet. So the next part is going to be a blue. So we are going to fold this piece of paper here, like so. And then we are going to cut away. Got to get my glove on here. We're going to cut away 1/4 inch again. And then we're going to get our blue fabric. I'm going to line it up against that yellow. Making sure that it's going to cover this entire area, and it does. Once again, you will push this back and just finger press. And then you're going to find your next section, which is A9. So I'm going to fold this back, take my ruler and my rotary cutter, cut 1/4 inch. And then you're going to get the next piece of fabric, which is A9. Now, like I said, you could use a little piece of scrap from your previous one, which I'm going to. And then you're just going to sew right along that line again. Flip this back. And then all that fabric covers where we need it to cover. So now we need to go all the way back over here again. And we're going to go between A1 and A4. So I'm going to fold this back, and then we're going to cut away 1/4 inch. Place our ruler, so it's 1/4 inch away from that piece of paper, and cut off the excess. We need a piece of brown. And we also have this piece of brown over here that we used before. I'm just going to use that. And stitch over this line here. Flip over this section. Press. Turn it around so we can see the next marking, which is A4, A5. Fold the piece of paper over. We're going to cut 1/4 inch, flip our piece of paper up, take a yellow piece of fabric. I'm having these little lines going the same way. So here we go. And now we are going to stitch along between A4 and A5. Flip back. Then we're going to go between A5 and A6, fold that fabric over, I need to wear my glove, safety, safety. Then we need a blue, place that down and stitch, flip it over, next section is A7, we're going to fold that back, cut off our 1/4 inch right here, flip this back, and then we're going to need another blue, and then that should cover what we need. So basically when we flip it back, we want it to cover the whole piece of paper. Flip the fabric back, sorry, and then that is the whole unit done. Now what we're going to do is flip it over, and then we are going to cut all the way around the outside of this white template. Now you want to make sure that you're not cutting the paper and you're just cutting the very outside where that paper is landing. You get to turn it over and see what it looks like. So this is section A. We're going to move on to section B. Take section B, review where B1 and B2 is. Then we're going to fold over that line so we know what we're doing. B1 is the first one that's going to be placed down. Just remember that that B1, the very first piece of fabric, always needs to be facing out like this, and we always need to make sure that we've got a 1/4 inch overhang and that all of our fabric is covering the area that we need to cover. So don't forget, this is the area that we need to cover. So I'm going to get another blue fabric. That one goes face down. So now you've got 2 pieces of fabric facing each other. You're gently going to take this over to the sewing machine. Just make sure that it didn't move on you. That's a 1/4 inch. And then you're going to sew between B1 and B2. Remember, we are cutting these threads away each time just so it's nice and tidy. Then flip that fabric back. Turn it around so we know exactly where we're going. And then we're going to fold back this B2 to B3. We're going to take off a 1/4 inch. I'm just going to use this other piece of fabric here because that's more than enough that we need. And then we're going to turn it over and we're going to stitch between B2 and B3. Flip the fabric back. Find out what the next piece of fabric is, and it's a yellow. So we're going to stitch between B3 and B4, fold it back, and we're going to cut a 1/4 inch. Get the yellow, line it up, making sure it's going to cover this area, and stitch. Fold over, and then we've got this B5, so I'm just going to fold this over and cut off a 1/4 inch. I'm going to find the next piece of fabric, which is the blue. So take that, and then stitch across here. Then we're just going to flip that back, and then we're going to turn it around, and we're going to go to the other side. Then we're going to go between B1 and B6, fold this over, cut your 1/4 inch off, line your yellow piece of fabric and stitch across. Then we're going to go B6 to B7, so I'm going to fold that back and cut my 1/4 inch, and now I need another piece of blue. Place that down, turn it around and stitch between here. Fold it back. And now we are going to once again go around cutting this. I'm going to cut right on the outside of this fabric. We're not cutting away the seam allowance. We are cutting right to the very edge of this fabric. This is the B unit complete, as you can see. So let's move on to C. We're going to review C, and then C1 and C2 starts here. So we're going to fold this line over so we can place our fabrics. Another way you can do this is placing them right sides together, like so. Fold the fabric over so it's going over C1, like so. We're going to take our piece of paper, our fabric over, and you're going to land that so it's 1/4 inch. You're going to open this up, and then you're going to sew in between 1 and 2. Your fabric should be right sides together, just double check. Fold the fabric up. And now we want that C2 and C3. You're going to fold that line over, and then you're going to take 1/4 inch off, and you're going to fold it back up and get a yellow. Then sew between, or sew on this line, Then flip the fabric back. Fold over between C3 and C4. Cut away your 1/4 inch. Next piece is yellow. Stitch down the line. Flip up. Find out our next piece of fabric is between 4 and 5. Fold over and cut your 1/4 inch. Flip your paper up. Get your yellow piece of fabric and place it down. Stitch down the line. Flip back. Then fold in between 5 and 6. Cut off your 1/4 inch. Get a piece of blue fabric. Place it down. Flip this over. Turn it around. And then fold this over here and cut 1/4 inch. This little piece should just cover this little area. So place that down and then stitch right there. Flip this over. And then once again, you can turn the whole section over and you can cut around the outside of this template. And this is the next part. So let's go over to D and review where D1 and D2 is, which is these two here. So we're just going to fold it over, and I'm going to do what we did last time. Just going to get the pink. I'm going to get a blue. I'm going to do them right sides together. Now just be careful because it only just covers. So the pink fabric wants to be facing the paper, and the blue fabric wants to be on top. So then we're going to sew in between D1 and D2. Then you're going to flip that fabric up and then fold over between D2 and D3. And then going to cut that 1/4 inch. You're going to get another piece of your pink. and making sure that you are going over where you need to be, because you need to cover this, both these pieces of paper. Stitch across here, fold up, and then you're going to fold between D3 and D4, cut the 1/4 inch, get yellow, face down, making sure that they are over the piece of paper. Stitch across, fold over, and then there's a little piece of blue over here. Just want to fold this over here, cut away that 1/4 inch, little piece of blue fabric here. So we put that right sides together and then stitch. Fold that section back, and then we're going to work on the other side. So that is between D1 and D5. You fold that over, cut your 1/4 inch, take a yellow piece of fabric, place it down, making sure it's going past that white piece of paper, stitch, flip this back, and don't forget this little blue piece here. So I'm going to just push this back and take off a 1/4 inch. One of your other scrap pieces should cover it. So I'm just going to place that there and stitch across. Flip that back, and then we're going to do the same thing as what we did with all the others. We are going to take off all the excess fabric. Is this unit complete? Now F1 and E1 are exactly the same, so we don't need to do these both together. I'll show you E1 and then you can do the F section on your own. So obviously we've only got 2 units, so we're just going to fold that line over, get our 2 blue fabrics, put them right sides together, because I find this is quite easier doing it that way. And then you're going to make sure you have the 1/4 inch allowance, and both of them fabrics, remember, are right sides facing. So this is how they should look, like that. Stitch in between, or stitch on this line. I keep saying in between. So stitch this line here, and then we cut the threads like we normally do. Flip the fabric over, and then we're going to cut around the template. So you will have E and F complete. So now we're going to start building the bunny. So we're going to move these sections to one side, and we're just going to work with these pieces here. Now you're going to make sure that the shorter side is at the bottom of these 2 pieces. Now you're going to take the paper out. The paper should come out relatively easy. You can keep bending it like this, and you are just going to tear the paper out. Be careful not to pull on the stitches. It really should come out very easily. Just press it down, just keep folding it over, and it'll pop right out. So do that on this section and your other 2 sections here. So that's D, E and F. I would go ahead and take this over to your iron just to make sure that these lay flat. I'm going to do the right section first. So we're going to put it face down like so. And we're going to take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to use this foot. It's a 1/4 inch foot with guide. See how it has this guide here? So I can butt my fabric up, and then with the setting on my machine, I can get a perfect 1/4 inch. On the Paper Luxe Soprano, I have these stitches available to me, 29, 30 and 31. And next to that, you'll see a P, which means it's a piecing stitch. So the one in the middle is the one I'm going to be using. So it sews from the middle. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot with guide, and it's going to give me that perfect 1/4 inch. Now, the 29 and 31 are the ones for if you don't have the 1/4 inch foot. And this one here sews to the right hand side of the foot, and this one here sews to the left hand side of the foot with your regular foot on. So to select stitch 30, I have to press this button here and then 30. Now you're going to sew that into place. You're going to push that back. There's no need to take it over to the iron to press just yet. Go ahead and do the other side. So I'm going to place it right sides together, making sure that that little rectangle piece is also in the correct place. Then stitch a 1/4 inch. Now you can go ahead and press both sides. The next part we're going to get is the top of the ears. So we're going to take all these papers out, just like we did before. Once again, take to the iron and press. Right sides together. And what you can do here is match these seams here and here together. And stitch into place at a 1/4 inch. You're going to fold this over, take to your iron and press. We're going to take the part with the eyes, take the paper out, take this to the iron and press. So the eyes and the face want to look like this, and then you're going to flip that up and you're just going to sew across a 1/4 inch. Push this down and press. We're going to take our last piece, take the paper out, and go ahead and press this. Then you should be able to match these seams at the end with these seams here. Sew into place. And then press. If this is looking a bit weird down here, don't worry about it. You're going to take your backing and your batting section. So the backing is going to be facing us. You're going to flip that over so it's to the table, and then you're going to have the batting, and then you're going to put your little quilt top right over the top there. In the top thread, I'm going to place in this nice golden thread that kind of matches with the bunny here. I use this stitch a lot. It's stitch number 4 on this decorative stitch. So I press this button here, and you just press OK, and then stitch number 4. OK. And I'm just going to go around the outside of my bunny doing that decorative stitch. Make sure you're not pushing too far down onto it because it stops it from doing its stitch. You're just guiding it gently through. I just love this stitch. It's really nice. So now what we're going to do is cut the excess away from the batting and the backing. Because this block is super tiny, it's 4.5 by 4.5. I mean, you didn't have to make a coaster like I'm showing you. You could have taken this block and just made a whole quilt with it. Totally up to you, but I wanted to do something finished. So we are not going to do a conventional quilt binding on this because we just don't have enough room to do that bias diagonal join. So we are going to cheat a little bit. So what we're going to do is we are going to stitch across a 1/4 inch from about 1/2 inch here and then down. Also notice how I've left some overhang on the binding. Make sure that you've gone back from your decorative stitch setting back to a regular straight stitch. Now see what I'm doing here. You're going to pull this binding up. And then you're going to push it back down on itself. And then you're going to stitch down. It's also best to just stop a little bit before the end And then you can flip this back up nicely like that. So this end is just sitting nicely, and then fold it back, stitch down, stopping a little bit before you get to the end here. Once again, flip that up, then fold it back onto itself. Then you're going to sew all the way down, but leave a little bit of space at the bottom. Like I said, because we've left that little bit of space, we can fold this over properly and then fold it back onto itself, and then stitch just a little bit here because we're now at the top again and we need to join them two together. Now what we're going to do is cut this a little bit shorter, like this. And I want a bit of an overlap. So I'm going to cut this over here. And then what I want to do is fold these over because I want to hide the raw seam like so. I'm going to do that with both sides. Then you're going to overlap both of these, making sure that these are both tucked in like so. And then what we're going to do is sew across. This is not a traditional way of doing a quilt binding, so do not do this on your quilts. I'm doing this just because it's a small item. You're probably going to have a load of threads everywhere. I would recommend trimming these away. So what we do is we machine stitch to the front and we hand bind to the back. So take your wonder clips and start clipping all the way around your coaster. Now you're going to hand bind the back of your coaster. I hope you've enjoyed watching this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and comment down below.